Okay, you are watching the Developer Experience track at Postman Galaxy. I'm Sue, I'm your MC on the planetary stage here. Make sure you ask any questions in the Slido tab over on the right. And you know the drill by now. You can find code of conduct, sponsored demos, games, giveaways over on the left in the reception and the expo halls. So we are going to jump straight into a panel discussion now on using Postman Collections as part of your developer experience. And on the panel, we actually have one of our hackathon prize winners. So that's kind of cool. So please welcome our panelists, Nicolas Grenié from Typeform, Jessica Garson from Twitter, Marcel Ribas from Dropbox, Julia Biro from Vonage, and Jayson DeLancey from Dropbox.
Poof!
Hello.
Travel into space. Here we are. So very happy to be here. Welcome to our panel where we're going to discuss Postman Collection and developer experience. I'm very happy to have all the panelists over here with me because it's hard to get to meet in person and we haven't saw each other for a long time. And thanks to the power of technology, we're here in the same room. So this is quite exciting. So before we get started and talk about what you're doing every day with your Postman Collections and how that works for your company, what you have developed, I will be very curious to hear who you are, where you come from, who you work for, and yeah, tell us a bit more about what you do. Julia, do you want to start?
Sure. Thank you. Hi, I'm Julia. I'm a developer advocate for Vonage. I'm being part of the developer education team. I mostly work with low-code solutions, and I'm aiming to enable more and more people to have access to our APIs. I am based in Bristol, UK. And thank you for having me.
Awesome. I see on the screen next is Jessica.
Hi, how's it going? I'm Jessica Garson. I'm a developer advocate at Twitter. And on my team, we are working on rebuilding the future of the Twitter API to finally give everyone the ability to understand, have fun, and improve the public conversation. I live in Brooklyn, New York. Outside of work, I make weird electronic music with code.
That's really cool. Marcel, tell us more about you.
All right. I'm Marcel Ribas. I'm with Dropbox. I've been with the company for 4 years. I'm originally from Brazil, but I live in Austin, Texas. At Dropbox, we are building collections in Postman so we can have our developer community interact with us a little bit more frequent and more often.
Great. And Jayson, I think that's your time.
Yeah. So hi, I am Jayson DeLancey. I manage developer relations for Dolby.io. And so a lot of times people learn that I work at Dolby Labs, like, oh, that's cool. What do you do? So we don't make speakers necessarily, but we've been advancing the science of sight and sound for decades, right? And so this cutting edge technology has kind of been in your cinema and your TV and your computer, your phone, music, movies, video games. And so Dolby.io is really where my focus is, which is on bringing some of that Dolby magic of audio quality and video to any developer that wants it as an API. So that's around media processing workflows as well as video conferencing and those types of applications.
That's really cool. I have to say I was one of the people that asked you what you actually do at Dolby because yeah, I see this logo everywhere, but I don't know what I can hack on as a developer. But to introduce myself also, I'm a developer advocate at Typeform. We are building the very interactive type of forms, so you can interact by text and very personalized. And we also have a video asset that makes you do this via video. And both of those products have Postman Collections. So I'm very happy to have a diversity of companies, a diversity of developer tools. Some companies are dedicated to developers. Some are just have an API on the side. So big, small companies, this is really awesome to gather all these type of experiences. But I was really curious to hear first, how did you get started on the collection? Why did you decide to have a collection to get started? Should we say, Julia, I think you have an interesting story around that.
All right. Well, little backstory. It was actually started as a hack day project with our open API expert and myself. Every quarter, we get a couple of days where we come together and build something either useful, fun, or anything really that is not related to our day-to-day, but somehow helps someone else. And this is how the first idea of a Postman collection came, because we really thought it would be helpful. Me, myself, focusing on low-code solutions. I'm always looking out for opportunities to lower the barrier to entry. And I thought that, well, we have open API documents. And people, what they do usually with those, import them into Postman. So why not take that document ourselves, create the collection, and take the extra step out, maybe put in a couple of variables, a little bit of scripting, so that the time to the first call is faster than before.
That's cool. That sounds like it was pretty easy to get started. Jessica, you did some stuff as well as a test, no?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, the first tweet that I ever responded to while being a developer advocate at Twitter was someone who asked us for a Postman collection. They were like, I'm new to working with APIs and I really want like a Twitter development Postman collection. And so about a couple of years ago, our team was getting started with Twitter developer labs. These were some experimental endpoints that we were releasing as we were starting to rebuild the Twitter API. These have eventually grown into labs endpoints. I mean, RV2 endpoints rather. And so this was kind of like the genesis before V2. And as part of that process, we were like, we had a chance to start anew and we were like, you know what we really want to do? We want to make a open API spec and we want to make a Postman collection just to make it easier for developers to work with. And that was really exciting just because in the past we've had like really amazing community members make Postman collections, but it was the first time that we really integrated it as part of our strategy, and it's been amazing so far. It's been so great, and we've really like woven it into our V2 documentation. Actually, part of this actually came up because I went to a talk by Joyce Lynn from Postman. Actually, she's the director of developer relations, and she was talking about ways to improve your documentation. And we were really excited about the Run in Postman button and the possibilities of that. And strategically, we just thought it made the most sense. And it's been really amazing to kind of watch it grow and really kind of like work with it. I wrote the first like using Postman, using our Postman collection tutorial, and we've really like taken that to the next level and like integrated as part of our quick start guide for our new documentation for the V2 of the Twitter API.
So you're mentioning the Run in Postman button. For those of you that are not familiar, it's as you're discovering the documentation of an API, you just click on the endpoint you want to try, really, and then it runs directly into Postman, and you can try out everything. Is that something you have implemented in your docs for others, folks here? Marcel, Jayson, have you implemented something similar with this Run in Postman button?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started to look at Postman a while ago. I was supposed to actually go to South America to teach some Postman seminars with Postman, but COVID hit and stopped our Galaxy tour. And but the idea was to bring the access to our API to Postman. To reach the whole 11 million developers that are connected to Postman, and several of them are in this Galaxy event. And the idea was similar to what Jessica said. It was actually originated by the collaboration with the Postman developer advocacy team, and also similar to what Julia mentioned. We also have a hack week. And then we used last year's Hack Week to develop our first Postman collection. And when we started building it, we realized that the company that we acquired a couple years ago called HelloSign, it's an electronic signature solution. They already had a collection published in Postman. And I'm like, oh, we got to do this. And so the first collection we built was exactly that. Were workflows that people were already trying to execute with our APIs that require multiple calls. You have to call one endpoint, then get the response call another endpoint, get the response call another endpoint in order to achieve your end result. And it was super hard for non-developers to actually do that, right? So we built a collection during our Hack Week that used Postman's tests engine to connect these endpoints. And then you like giving a certain input, you get the output from the Dropbox environment through the API. And it was, and when we published, it was easy for us to refer customers to, just go to this API network in Postman and click run in Postman, and you're done. Right?
So we're diving into the nitty gritty of the how the things work in the back end of the collection and how you make this whole experience better. Jayson, for you, that it's dealing, when you told me how you deal with this media stuff, it sounds. It sounds different. So I was very curious. What was your goal when you build this Postman collection for your developer audience?
Yeah, I think it sort of stems from, in terms of your problems as a developer, text is pretty easy to work with. Images get a little bit harder. As you start getting into audio and video, it's certainly the level of complexity increases. And so we approached Dolby I/O as API first, but it didn't, and we only launched this last year, but it became very clear very quickly that some folks in our community are maybe not as comfortable using APIs, right? So we started off with a bunch of examples and that kind of onboarding of curl commands and things like that is a least common denominator. And the emphasis is on least there because, it's a lot of smart people, but there's folks who have an audio background or a DSP background. Maybe they're a podcast host that also, programs on the weekend and those types of individuals who are still part of our community and they still want kind of the overall experience. They're just in different industries, healthcare, education, collaboration, that kind of thing. And so I think it was sort of stemmed from that, which was, okay, so how do you help people that need to deal with big binary files as part of a media workflow, just getting comfortable with the cloud and those types of issues. And that was kind of the genesis of a lot of our emphasis on saying, hey, no, we should get these Postman collections up, get a workspace so that we can start helping people.
Okay. So once you have this set up, once you have the first developers using it, did you find out, I guess, as Marcel, you said, like, it's not only just having the different endpoints being out there, you had to provide some guide. So I'm curious to hear from all of you, how did you turn this Postman collection into something more than just a collection of endpoints, really?
I'll jump in here. One thing that was actually kind of convenient about sort of that transition is we did sort of standardize on Open API spec for a lot of our workflows as well. And so even just simply ingesting from an Open API spec kind of got us off to a really great start of exposing some of the documentation and things like that. Which allowed us to kind of take that next step of saying, okay, well, that's great reference, but how do you synthesize that into a little bit more of a quick start or a sequence of steps that somebody would want to go through?
Jessica, I'm very curious about your quick start and how that helped people beyond just the collection.
Yeah, this is actually something that I'm pretty excited about. One of the things that's really interesting about our new V2 APIs is that we've moved to a what you ask for is what you get model. So instead of just getting the full payload back, you have to ask for specific fields. And this makes our Postman collection really amazing because you can actually test and play with the payload that you get back and like be like, oh, if I add this parameter, what does this do? Like, and just actually getting to like get to know the APIs. And because of this new change, we really figured that we would like lean into it. Our quick start guides in the past had like Python code, or we had at one point curl commands. We had a couple of different languages at various points, but we really kind of leaned in to using Postman just because it's sort of a really great place for new developers to start. And as we moved into V2, we realized just how valuable of a resource this was. And creating a Postman collection made it easier for developers to connect to the Twitter API and have a good first experience. So strategically, it just made the most sense.
I think you're touching on something very interesting, because you mentioned that the Quick Start had examples in all different languages. And as people that work in developer relation, we know we want to talk to as many type of developers in as many languages as possible, but it's also a pain to maintain. For those of you that have SDKs or that have libraries, and I'm looking at you, Julia, because I know you're you're doing a lot of things around that. How it helped you? What's different?
So I suppose our collection is the newest out of everyone here. We're still pretty much at the beginning of it and trying to figure it as we go. But we do have loads of SDKs. I think I could count 8 languages, CLI, Sandbox, all those things. But when I went and asked a couple of colleagues, either on our team or other people internally, what do they do when they have to fix something or understand something? They go to Postman, either build the request from scratch or import the OpenAPI document and have a play with it. So regardless of the background they come from, before they touch code, they want to see how it works. So I've seen this tendency of people default to Postman. Once they understand what's happening, then they go back to the SDK to implement it.
So that's almost the source of truth, right? If it works in Postman, it should work in your code.
Yeah, I was going to say something to that regard. Before I was a developer advocate, I was a developer trying to use someone else's APIs. And also I spent some time as an educator. And the hard part is when I was trying to learn a new API was to actually find a sample that was in the language that I was comfortable on, right? I'm not a C# guy, so I would kind of steer away from tutorials in C#, right? And so what we decided was, what we noticed was exactly that Postman could be that common denominator for us to teach our APIs. Instead of going through a specific SDK to show a particular side of our API, we do these collections in Postman when you have people try the endpoints themselves, but with the guidance that Postman can offer, and then learn how to use them before you actually go to the SDK that you like.
And so that works on the developer marketing front of talking to more developers. But something like this could work also internally now, like people that in your team are dealing with the API, but are not really building the API. So I'm thinking about the customer success. I'm thinking about sales engineer. What has been your experience around this? And yeah, Jessica?
I actually had a really fun experience with my colleague, Chloe. We actually taught someone from our design team how to use Postman because she was learning how to code and just having issues making her first requests. And so together we worked together using Postman, and she was able to make her first request. And like it was really like one of the more fun meetings I've had in the past 6 months because I was like watching the light bulb go off like while she was like making her first API calls using Postman, and it was so exciting. So yeah, that's definitely something that we've experienced. Also internally, we use Postman for testing actually a lot of times. So if we have a new endpoint that we're playing around with, we have a staging header that we use, and we'll just make sure that everything's working. It also allows us to mimic the developer experience. As my colleague yesterday said in the keynote, Daniele, he said that Postman was our most used agent header. And so because so many people are making requests using Postman, we always test it before we launch a new product too. And it's part of our bug bash process of just making sure that like the product is ready to go before we release it. And we want to make sure that we're making the same experience and testing it. And so we use it a lot for like internal testing. It's usually like one of the first things I'll do when I get access to a new endpoint before we release it to make resources is I'll start to play around with it in the Postman collection.
Is that other? Yeah, no, that's something I heard through the different conversations where we all have this private collection where we keep adding things we want to test, and
Yeah.
eventually that makes it to public. Is that something you do as well, Jayson?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're starting to take advantage of the fact that there's the public workspaces and seeing how that works in from a collaboration standpoint. I mean, obviously there's sort of that team workflow of having a collection, being able to copy it. But I think your example of like, customer success and some of these other areas, it's again, I kind of take that mantra. Everyone's a developer, right? And we all kind of, to a certain extent, we deserve nice things too. And so some of our APIs, they're public facing, but like from a customer success standpoint, being able to get additional details about media and or a streaming session or something of that sort makes sense. And that gives another tool in the arsenal to just say, hey, I can take, this common collection, add a few additional things, or leverage some common functionality across them, even though some of the use cases might start to diverge a little bit.
And so did you have one question I have around this is like I remember in our discussion some of you mentioned that some teams now they come up with the Postman collection before sharing anything else, and that like where they engage in the conversation and is like this is what we want to put in the hands of developers eventually, and you can have a conversation of like, yeah, this is the way to run it, this is the way we want the parameters to be. Cool. Another question I had. Tell me.
I just wanted to interject on the sales engineering type that you mentioned, right? We basically have two focus for the APIs. Like the APIs for Dropbox, they're not monetized, so they are like here on the side. You already use Dropbox, then you can use the API to do whatever you want with your Dropbox content. Now the HelloSign APIs are monetized. There's a product SKU that you can buy just the API access, and then you use that for to automate your electronic signature workflows. So that part requires more engagement from the sales engineers because they need to teach their customers how easy it is to use the HelloSign API in order for them to buy it, right? So I've noticed that they have used Postman internally after they found out about the collections, because they can show that in a sales call really easy. Hey, here I send a signature request and boom, and through Postman without having
so
to.
That becomes a sales argument, right? Look at
Absolutely.
how it is. And so do you run internal workshops to keep the team updated around those new features on how to use it?
Yeah, we have champions, like people that have been already exploring these with their customers. And then just last week we had a workshop on one of our solutions architects, Diego. He presented basically what he does in Postman in front of customers so that everyone else could try as well.
Is that something that others have as well, like this champion group that it can share early preview of things? So that's how they get the feedback early on.
We've had just... actually. You could go. Sorry.
You go.
Oh no, you could
go. So I'll be quick. We've just started our Voyagers program. So this is the Champions program, and it is definitely our plan to share with them products ahead of time.
Yeah, we've, instead of a Champions program, we've actually done it a little bit differently, where we've had a few demos where we've shared that, and we actually used it as a way to prototype as well. So we had, we actually have a study that we did with Postman, but we relied on a series of pre-request scripts when we prototyped some of our APIs with a core group of developers. So there has been some ways we've used it for like demos or for like some betas that we've rolled out as well.
And that makes me think, because as some of your collections are really young and they just came out a couple of weeks, months ago, or just a year ago, how did you handle the relationship with the community that may have built on their own as a patcher? Like, it doesn't exist, let's make I will build one and I will share with the world. How did you manage this relationship with the original creator of the community-powered collection? Or did you at all? Or am I just
that's a tough question.
Yeah, at Twitter.
Yeah, tell us.
At Twitter, we have like a long history of working with community members who are making their own libraries. We don't have any current in-house SDKs. Most of them are created by our community, so we just celebrate it. And we've seen a couple of like collections come about and some of that, and for us, it's just really exciting. I'm really honored every time that like we see something like that, and I just get really inspired by it as well.
Because as you said, this is another part of the open source thing, because anybody can contribute and make their own collection and their own flavor of it.
Yeah, on our side, it's hard to, like you said, it's too young, so we haven't reached out yet to the already existing community efforts on Postman. We have tried to find the GitHub collections that actually GitHub Postman Collections published on GitHub that people have done in the past, but we still haven't started a real program around like let's get everyone together in this public workspace and let's work together. We open the public workspace and people are coming on their own, but I think a next logical step would be actually scour the internet and invite people that are already building these on their own.
Yeah, for us, it's very similar, relatively new product, and as people are learning different sorts of media workflows and things like that, we haven't had a whole lot of collections developed from the community yet. But I think that's also where the fact that a lot of products that have been out for a number of years, you get this sort of divergence too. Different people have different ideas about how things should work, and that makes sense as different use cases come to pass. And I think that's again where it's like the idea of the public workspace and getting some of those forking models so that someone can kind of still have some commonality. I think from a version management and some of those things, and also just helping with discoverability is going to be a big win for us, just because we don't have sort of that legacy per se already out there.
And on the discovery side, there is this public API network where if you're using Postman and at one point you need an API, you will look for Twitter, you'll look for Vonage, Dolby, or Dropbox, and you should find at the top those workspace or collections. Were you able to measure the impact on this discovery aspect that is provided beyond the regular channels that you're advertising to? I guess it's a bit early on also to know how this brings value.
We noticed
I'd say
like when we published. I'm sorry, Jayson. When we published, like a lot of people kind of found out like in the first week that we started and published, and we had a spike of downloads. But we still couldn't measure the actual usefulness of those collections yet, so we still trying to find through the public workspace ways that people can get back to us and say, hey, this was great, this was not so great, and how can we build this together?
Yeah, we're so lucky because we have the Twitter developer community forums, and so we've seen a lot of people asking about like, hey, I'm making this Postman request and having this issue, or this is what I'm getting back. And so it's been really cool to see that too. Like every time that I see that, I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. People are actually using our Postman collection. Also, on our Postman page, we've had over 28,000 views, which is pretty exciting as well. So, for us, this is just one way that we could connect with developers better. And it's really exciting to see that developers are using our new Postman collection. Also, our ads API team as well also has a Postman collection. So we have the V2 Postman collection and we have the Twitter ads API collection as well too.
The reason why I was asking this is also because I know some of you mentioned this time to hello world, the time to first call. And in our world of developer relations, we're interested to track those metrics. And so I was interested also to know like which type of metrics you're trying to track around the adoption or the usage of this.
Yeah, this is something we've been.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I feel like I've been talking a lot, but this is something we've been thinking about a lot. Is like, how do we measure this more, and like, how can we measure the time to hello world better, and like, how can we be better about having metrics to see like how many people are making like multiple requests versus one request. And so we've been really kind of thinking about that more. Actually, Andy Piper, who I think is in the chat, has been working on that a lot. They're actually now the new maintainer of our Postman collection with Emily from our team as well. And they're on the dev enablement team inside of our DevRel team. And they're super awesome. And they've been thinking about that a lot.
Yeah, I was thinking about metrics. Like on our end, we can tell how many people are using Postman as a client when they call the APIs, but I don't know if they're using our collection or just a manually created request, right? So that part, we would like to see a way to do that. So see exactly how much our collections are being used versus just regular, a request that people manually create.
So you can build some hacks. So I guess you see this through the user agent, because when someone makes a request in Postman, you see the Postman user agent. Maybe by adding special headers or something, or something like specific that will say this is a call from the Postman collection. Is that something anybody is doing? Like, are you trying to add special headers to have this type of information?
Not yet, but that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Considering it.
Yeah, we've definitely been thinking about it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you have a lot of tricks as well on like things you recommend others to do and or don't do in the collection. Is there anything you want to share with the rest of the community of like?
So we have two ways of authenticating with our APIs, and one of them is a little bit more complicated. And I'm still undecided whether the way we went is the way to go. But normally you would go to terminal and back at least twice to authenticate. And we use the pre-request script to make another call in there and generate a JWT so that you can make an outbound call without going out first. Yeah, I probably should have mentioned we're doing communication APIs. And also made use of the test area to save certain variables into either collection level variables or into the environment. So, for example, if you're building phone call related things into your application, then you create one call and the ID gets saved. So you can just go on to the following steps and do different things to that certain call, maybe read out a message or stream an audio file into there. And those are all one-click requests going forward, because the return is always extracting the variables that are needed for the next one.
So you added a bit of magic to save copy pasting and explanation on get this ID here, store it by yourself there. Everything is done for the user.
So that's what I try to do. Yes. So trying to make things a little easier. I'm not sure how easy we should go with them, because I've heard also feedback that people like to discover themselves certain things and build the requests from scratch or just have a play with the collection. I would be interested to see what everyone else thinks about how much we should do for the user.
Marcel, you mentioned you did some script as well, huh?
Yeah, it was very interesting. It was well, first of all, thank you, Julia. That's basically the biggest challenge that we have is authentication, right? Because it's hard for you to find out a way without having to manually copy and paste a key from somewhere else, right? There's ideally our security team was hoping to use like an OAuth flow from within Postman, starting the OAuth flow, grabbing the right key and using them in your requests. So we've been using environment variables or collection variables for that, so you can store the keys for your particular environment, and then you can use them in all requests. Then we had to use so because we the first collection we published was actually a collection to help administrators for Dropbox teams to execute a few actions within their teams without having to issue many calls. So they basically run the collection runner on a folder. Each folder comprises a few endpoints that we string together through scripts, test scripts, and variables. So we create variables. We use collection variables, but it could be environment, it could be something else. For us, it made sense to embed the variables within the collection. And then we issue a call to an API endpoint, grab the result, massage it a little bit, issue another call, and get the results until we get the final result, right? And that saved a lot of time for when you do bulk operations, right? You need to delete X amount of folders, right? Or you need to create users or create a group and put a lot of users in a group. So all these things are super easy to do with the set next request scripting in the Postman tests. So super easy.
Yeah, we also struggle with authentication too. We have a lot of different. We also have many different methods that we have. So we do have some scripts that take your consumer key and consumer token and create a bearer token. And then the ads API team also has a pre-request script as well. And we also use test scripts and a collection to automate our API workflow for our tweet compliance endpoint as well. So, there has been some work there. We also are currently manually generating our Postman collection, and I think we'd like to move into taking our open API spec and having an automated workflow. And that's something that I've been really inspired by just by being part of this conference and seeing everybody talking about it and hearing everybody and talking to Nicolas as well too about what they do at Typeform. It's just been really inspiring. And I think we do have the open API collection or the open API spec, and we'd like to be able to automate that more as well.
Yeah. I think there are two really good points that were brought up in some of these too, is that in terms of different authentication methods and change inevitably happens, right? And there's some of those little tips and tricks of like using test output and things like that to chain them together. But yeah, it's that dealing with change over time is definitely one of the things that we think about a lot in terms of leveraging the open API spec, because we also have, even that spec is kind of our, in some ways, the contract that has a bunch of stakeholders, not only the Postman collection, but our documentation generation, API verification and testing and things like that. And so trying to get even just version management and some of those things down right, down at the micro versioning as well. It's definitely something that weighs on our mind. So listening to some of the other talks and how people are dealing with it is useful as we're starting to get into some of that growth as well.
So this is awesome, like the whole automation stuff and how you empower the ownership is actually automated of this collection. But at the same time, it sounds scary. And that was the thing that for us that we didn't get started, because doing it manually sounds very scary, and that you will diverge very heavily whenever you ship stuff. But could you reassure people that it's okay that you start manually? Like Jessica, you're running, Twitter is a pretty big API already that has a lot of users. You've done that manually. I think we all started manually through the different hacks that you've made. could you reassure people that it's not too hard to build or get started at least? And get a sense that you can already learn from it just by making it manually at least.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like you said in the beginning, we just don't want it to be just a list of endpoints, right? Because then you could just import your Open API spec. Or in our case, we don't use Open API for Dropbox. At least we don't use Open API, so we use Stone, which is a specification / generation language that we created. So we needed to create a Stone generator to actually spit out a Postman schema collection. But that is just basically a list of API endpoints, right? The magic happens afterwards. How you your documentation, your scripts, all your automation, your tests, your mock servers, right? All these things are not, at least in our end, are not automated yet. So it's basically part of a developer relations team to own it and create those assets to our developer community based on the automatic generated SDKs and things like that.
That's really good.
We are 100% manual at the moment as well. And I was quite pleasantly surprised how easy it was. Starting from an Open API specification, you really do start with a good base, and from there it's only a couple of steps of seeing where you can improve on the experience. So I am still looking into making more of an automated approach out of it, but so far I'm quite happy with what we ended up with.
This is really good to hear. Because on our side, I'll tell you, we have one product that the only documentation is actually the Postman Collection. It was a small team startup spin up of the main product, and we keep it that way, and it's fine. Now we're probably at a time where we need to scale it better, but you can check this. We have few questions from the audience, and so if you want to ask your questions, feel free to do that in the chat or on the Slido. I think this is the other tab. And one question is, I think it's really interesting also, is a question from Prashan, who asked if you have a sandbox for your developers, and if this change, we lost Jessica. If this changes anything in the way you approach the collection. And I'm thinking, I'm thinking about all of you, because some of the API calls could be very expensive, and I don't want to mess up with my credits. Yeah, tell us.
We do have sandboxes that is on our developer platform, and I'm actually thinking about adding mock servers to the Postman workspace, because we do work with real carriers. So that means that if you want to send an SMS or place a phone call, it's actually going through. So that would be a good use case for using the mock servers. The sandbox we're using for use cases, for example, integrations with WhatsApp, which is a little bit harder to approach. There is a lot of setup that is involved. So it's always nicer to have a go at it, see if that's what you're looking for, and after that, committing to it.
Anybody has taken a similar approach on like switching on the collection so you can have using both the sandbox or the prod stuff?
I think it's an interesting area to explore, some of the mock servers and some of the other functionality. It's not something that we've really turned on as much yet. And I don't think it's necessarily even easy to qualify it as a sandbox per se, but one of the challenges we often found was, people were trying to test and get things going. Generally speaking, storing media in the cloud is not necessarily trivial in and of itself. And different people will use different cloud storage providers. And so in that sense, we have some temporary storage that allows people to sort of drop off a file and get a sense of how things behave with their media before trying to create a separate S3 bucket or another storage location, or whatever the case might be for a real production application. So it still gives someone a way to get started.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about using mock servers for demos. I think we're really excited by the possibility of it. We think it's a cool way that you can show a demo without having like full access to everything. And so I don't know, like we're really excited about it. And we've been talking a lot about it, but we haven't quite done it. But it's definitely something that, we definitely want to explore for the future.
Yeah, same here. It's I think mock servers are the greatest thing ever. It's just I joke it's black magic because it's so easy to do, and it's it saves you a lot of time instead of having to hit your real endpoints or create an environment full of content in order for you to test a particular call, right? And you can basically mock that. So definitely going to that direction. In terms of sandbox, we see a lot of developers just using their personal Dropbox accounts and their personal HelloSign accounts to try out most of our endpoints. So we never had a particular sandbox environment, labeled that way. But I think mock servers can actually solve that problem in like in an easy way.
It's good for the business. You get 2 accounts for 1 developer. That's great, right? Yeah. You have the enterprise and the personal one. I played with some shipping API where you were creating a label every time you were making a call, and I'm glad it was virtual because otherwise I would have sent a lot of parcels all over, and I will have paid thousands of dollars in FedEx fees. So I see I feel like we're always on the same page coming to this Postman conference where we're doing some stuff with Postman, but there's so many other things around that we can improve and so many things that we can try, and specifically around the collections. I was wondering if you can share, so we touched a bit on this, but the future improvements that are coming, the things that you're really looking forward to implement, things that are a bit more less than just the research and like how it will be cool, but if you already have a plan around those stuff, if you have.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about the future. And I'm sure also if you have any ideas too, Andy Piper would love to talk to you about that as well. I'm just volunteering him or them for that rather. So yeah, but we've been talking a lot about auto-generating the script using our Open API spec, cleaning up our Open API spec. There's actually a really fun Hack Week project at Twitter. We do a 1-week Hack Week every few months or so. I don't know. It seems to be kind of random, but we have the week to work on whatever we want. And so some of us are talking about cleaning up our Open API spec and adding some stuff to it. So that's really exciting to us. Also, more of a working relationship with Postman. We just onboarded Postman as a supplier, which is pretty exciting for us. So we definitely want to work more with Postman and work closer just because there's so much that we know that we can do. And then we've also considered using it for API monitoring instead of run scope as well.
Nice.
And also we've been talking a little bit about GitHub support as well too. So yeah.
Okay. Anybody want to share what they're exciting about, what they want to build?
I'll go. Yeah, and I think Twitter is doing something similar. It's I don't know if you have checked the student expert collection from Postman. So it's basically teaches you Postman with lessons within Postman. So all the content, all the instructions, and everything is within Postman. So you run it from within Postman and you learn the API like that. So, and I think Twitter was experimenting with that, if I'm not mistaken, Jessica. So the idea that we're looking at is to create Dropbox and HelloSign API classes within Postman using that same sort of approach that, still very early stages, but we're super excited about that.
That sounds exciting. Oh, sorry. I was actually thinking about coming up with something like that. So there are a couple of steps that we already are moving towards. So a little better organized public workspace, mock servers. I would like to go into the visualizer for our client side things. And collection for the beta APIs to share with our Voyagers program. But something I'm not exactly sure how, but I would be really excited to get started on is a sort of interactive tutorial kind of things. I reached out to a couple of people and I got back a feedback that they are creating their collections as a workspace. So treating a collection as a workspace and maybe laying out a way of step-by-step tutorial that people could go through, and that way get to know the APIs, or maybe even bring out third-party APIs that go well with your own to create a use case.
You see, I'm fuming here. I'm like, ooh, that sounds awesome. This is what I want to do too. Jayson, anything on your plate?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're tackling a few different things. One is also just the breadth of the collections and things that we have there as different use cases and things like that come up. And a lot of that really, even from earlier in this conversation, right? Listening to the metrics and what people were looking for is kind of the driver for some of that. As customer success type questions come in or things in the community that we are listening to, that's probably driving a lot of the, oh yeah, that's a great idea. We should, make that easier, or, oh, this is a pain point for someone else. Let's fix that. So trying to mature that listening and reacting to feedback process is high priority for us. I think the other part of it is also internal, right? As in terms of how to work with our internal teams, making sure that we're controlling that release, and then spotting some of these new opportunities and other features where if people internally are trying to do things to improve our APIs and trying to build up very complicated solutions that maybe Postman already has something that's really streamlined that helps not only the internal team but also external community, then it's a big win to prioritize that type of work.
There's so many good things to explore. So I can't wait to try and look at what's coming next in your APIs. And Jill, you mentioned something that I've been playing around for the hackathon. It was the visualizer, and that brings everything we've discussed about the onboarding, about the user, for the user, and giving them information for people that are not developers. I think with the visualizer, it could be really interesting as well. We have, I guess that would be probably our last question, and we touched a bit on this, but I think it's interesting to dig into more. If you have some things to share on this, is around sharing the collection, collaboration around different teams, and how you've done and managed the version control and the governance around this. If you have any tips to share on things that worked for you.
Yeah, that was one of the first problems or challenges we had, was to make sure that the right people had access to the one that's published externally, right? So a little bit of education internally on how to use the fork and pull requests, because it's slightly different than GitHub's. It kind of follows, or Git's, it kind of follows the same protocol, but it's slightly different, so you need a little bit of education there. Of course, you need a Postman, I think, business license. No, at least I forgot. I think it's a team license, so everyone is on the team and named accounts, so you know who is actually in charge of making the changes public. But with a public workspace, things changed, so you can have collaborators from external teams, but internally you still need that version control, that governance person, to make sure all changes are reviewed before they make it to the published one.
So there's a gatekeeper, and that could be the developer relation team, making sure that everything that goes public goes by you first.
Yeah, we have separate environments. That's been really helpful. So we have separate workspaces for development. We all have our personal ones too. And then we also have a staging that has all of our staging headers and all of that. And then we also have our production one, and that sort of helps keep things separate. There was some early confusion around which was which, but we've landed there, which has been helpful, just having that separation.
I mean, it could be scary, right? This is what I do sometimes. I play around with some request. I see an orange dot, and I'm like, oh, I haven't saved it. I save it. Oops, that's public. So yeah, it's good if you have processes.
Definitely happened.
That's really cool. Another question that I had is, you didn't start your company at the Postman Collection, but today, if you were building an API company, a developer tool, will you do this earlier on? Would that be one of the first things you do compared to all the other developer relation activities when you think about it? Julia, you have?
Definitely. Like, one of the first things, I think the way Open API spec is becoming more and more of a standard, I would put Postman right next to it.
Yeah, same. When Twitter first created their APIs 10 years ago, Postman didn't exist. And I think now, it would definitely be something that I would prioritize, especially just because having a Postman collection just really makes your API more accessible to more developers. Like, I still remember the first time that I ever connected to an API and how scared I was and how nervous I was. And so, having an environment like Postman, I think really kind of changes everything. It makes it so much easier to get started, so much quicker. And I think, it's really exciting to be part of creating tools for that.
Awesome. So I can't wait to see more API companies launching their API like this, and get to hack stuff and connect stuff together. If you want to explore things, that's something I think that is new on the web version of the API is the search. And so now you can search across different public workspaces, public collections, the API network, and that makes you discover a lot of different APIs and what people have built. So this is really exciting. We are 2 minutes to the end. If you want to share some wisdom.
Yeah, I have a parting thought. I was just thinking about what Jayson said, people that are using their APIs and still worried about how they're going to store and how these things like that. So I was thinking that public workspaces could potentially evolve to a company to company public workspaces. Let's say we have a public workspace where Dolby and Dropbox are working on a joint solution, and then one with Vonage and Twitter working on a joint solution, right? We are still not there because public workspaces are kind of a very new thing, but I think that's the direction we should all go. Let's try to create these things in Postman and see what happens.
Yeah, that cross collaboration with partners and other integrations is definitely a good example use case, I think.
All right, so stay tuned for the joint workspace between Dolby, Dropbox, and all of us here. Awesome. Thank you all for your time. That was awesome to have you all over the world. Good night, good day, depending on where you are. Go back to sleep. No, there's more programming coming up. So stay tuned for the rest of the conference, and see you on the internet, on the collections, on the sites, on the workspaces. Happy hacking.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.